the NBA right now is in big trouble. I don't mean that in a digital sense. More people are consuming the NBA's content through digital media more than ever before. And I don't mean in merchandise sales. According to Adam Silver, merchandise sales have been up the past few years. Nor do I mean that in a relevant sense. The NBA commands just as much as attention as it has in past years, if not more. I mean, its shutdown was the turning point for America to seriously take notice of the pandemic. That's pretty relevant if you ask me. No, where the NBA is lacking, and significantly so, is its TV ratings. The 2020 season was the worst viewed season in the past 30 years, down almost 50% from just 8 years ago on ABC in the regular season. The playoffs didn't fare much better despite the incredible basketball that was being played. It was clear to everyone watching that the basketball was just as good, if not better, than years past. Contrary from 2018 and 2019, LeBron James made a full run in the playoffs with the most popular franchise in the NBA. The rival Los Angeles Clippers were also a huge draw to the casual fan, whether or not to, completely hate them or support them in some way. There are 4 Game 7s in the 2020 NBA playoffs, tied for second all-time in NBA history, and 2 3-1 comebacks, the first time that we've seen that since 2016. And we all know how that went. While not having Steph Curry in the bubble, there were breakout performances from Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray, and the ascension of Jimmy Butler from tyrant to homeless superstar. And that's not even to mention the theatrics of Damian Lillard and the Trailblazers dragging their team into the playoffs. What I'm trying to get at here is that basketball wasn't the reason that there were less people watching. While sure, in the finals we didn't get Giannis Antetokounmpo versus LeBron, or even just the Boston Celtics versus the Los Angeles Lakers, but it was still a LeBron James-led team in the finals. Even so, as the headline showed for an impressive amount of time, the ratings for the NBA Finals were down 70% from normal. Now, as for the non-basketball reasons as to why this might be happening, that's a little bit of a doozy right there. The main explanation by the NBA for a lack of TV interest is that less people are watching television due to cord cutting. I mean, there are far less people watching TV now than ever, particularly with the younger audience that the NBA is shooting for, given that there are a lot more entertaining options to go through. Like, watching this video. If you haven't liked the video, make sure that you do. Thank you. But as with everything, there's a lot more under the surface. The metric that we learned about earlier, about the regular season being down 45% and the finals being down 70%, were both from the NBA on ABC, the American Broadcasting Corporation, one of the only channels in the United States that is free to anyone with a television and antenna. I think I've only been in one house total within my time here on Earth in the United States of America where they didn't have ABC available. So obviously that just can't be it. With this past social justice movement notwithstanding, there's just been less interest in watching full NBA games. Part of that had to do with early season injuries to Zion Williamson and Steph Curry, but also the ever-increasing trend of declining ratings in the NBA. Before 2020, there were already more and more people deciding that watching full NBA games on TV wasn't worth their time. But during 2020, the whole slew of circumstances, from the political polarity and hypocriticism from the NBA, to concurrent viewership with the NFL, to the already waning interest in television, all of that made the ratings problem rear its ugly head to show its nastiness for everyone to see and for many people to criticize. So is this concerning? In the long run, no. The NBA is still the world's most popular American sports league, and they're still 5 or so years away from the next television deal. The MLB, despite facing many declines as well in the past few years for TV ratings, was able to sign a lucrative contract for the next 7 years that surpassed its previous one. Given that popularity in the NBA is still growing, it's pretty obvious to assume that if Major League Baseball is able to get a more lucrative contract, the NBA should easily be able to follow suit. But at the end of the day, the NBA is a business, and one thing about businesses that you should always know: their number one priority is to grow, and to grow as much as you can. And you can't do that if the number one metric for the past 3/4 of a century in your industry isn't, growing. And sure, they might be able to grab a better deal than before, but it wouldn't be as big as it could be. So while Adam Silver and Mark Cuban say these things about not caring about ratings, in reality, the NBA has a very vested interest in increasing TV ratings. So what does this all have to do with the last time that the NBA started on Christmas, Kip Kame? Glad you asked. Unless you didn't, or like I titled it something different and it's not. That wouldn't make. Let me just tell you about 2011. Alright, the 2011 NBA lockout was one of the most interesting stories of the decade. Coming off a spectacular season that featured LeBron James' Miami Heat, Kobe Bryant's Los Angeles Lakers, an actually good Knicks team, and 2011 MVP Derrick Rose, and also the actual champions Dallas Mavericks, the NBA was an incredibly good spot for the 2011-12 season. LeBron had laid the biggest egg of his career, and all eyes were on him to make good on his lavish promise that he made at the beginning of the Heatles era.
Not 2, not 3, not 4.
The Mavericks were defending champions. Derrick Rose was coming off his MVP season looking to compete for a title. Kobe was still in the league. The Spurs were still mightily dangerous, and Oklahoma had its 3 future MVPs. The 2011-12 season was going to be an exciting one, until the NBA's owner tried to take away roughly $300 million from the players per year in the new collective bargaining agreement. Yeah, that's a lot of $300 million. Yeah, that's a lot of money, and that was supposed to be actually way over $1 billion, given that it was going to be over the next 7 years. So long story, very, very short, since explaining the whole thing would take a whole nother video. Let me know if you want that. The players didn't like those out of the owners, and the owners didn't like that the players didn't like those out of the owners, so the NBA went into a lockout. Since you need both sides to agree on, an agreement, things were looking real unproductive. Both sides wanted their money very, very badly. Badly enough to halt the season until the other side gave way. So for the first 2 months of the season, the NBA and its players were in a standoff, since you're not allowed to operate a business without deciding on how the money is going to be shared. This stoppage continued until a compromise was finally reached on November 26th, and the NBA was set to restart on Christmas Day, 2011. There were many people hating and doubting that the NBA would come back strong, given that it just come off a nasty labor dispute and it left a huge hole in the NBA regular season. And as you could guess, there were many people that were very, very wrong. Christmas for the NBA is a special time. As the biggest holiday in the United States and the setup of the other major sports leagues in the US historically not well suited for winter play, the NBA had Christmas as a gimme. Since its significant rise in popularity in 1983, the NBA has been synonymous with the opening of presents and holiday Christmas parties. Ever since I've started watching the NBA, there hasn't been a Christmas where NBA basketball wasn't on. I'm sure a lot of you guys can attest to this as well. There's just something different with the NBA on Christmas. It just has this different feel to it. Whether or not it's the memories of Christmas that are associated with the basketball, or it's the way that the NBA has advertised it, masterfully to evoke that spirit, there's just something about NBA and Christmas that just gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling, It takes me back to some happy days. And for a lot of people, particularly the casual fan, that's when the NBA really starts. That's the time when the NBA stops being cable exclusive and the general viewing public warms up to the regular season. Before that, the games are decidedly meaningless for the casual fan, unless it's a highly promoted matchup. This wasn't something that was really put to the test until the NBA was forced to start itself on Christmas Day. Even though just literally a month ago there wasn't going to be a season at all, 2011 was one of the most, if not the most, successful Christmases in NBA history. Even with speculation that the 2011 NBA season would be somewhat tainted by the labor disputes, opening night was incredibly spectacular. At the time, the premier game with Derrick Rose's Bulls versus Kobe's Lakers was the third most watched regular season game on NBA on NBC ever. And it's held its own throughout time, only surpassed by the rematch of LeBron's Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Golden State Warriors. And to add on to that, the matchup between the Boston Celtics and New York Knicks was the most watched regular season game on cable ever. All in all, the total viewership on Christmas in 2011 was the most in NBA history, at 6.31 million viewers on average for 5 games. The NBA had stumbled over gold, but they never went back looking for it. For the rest of the season, even through the first 2 months that were missing, the NBA did the best that it's ever done in the 21st century. Throughout the 66 games of the 2011 regular season, the NBA recorded 5.2 million viewers per game on ABC and 2.5 million viewers per game on TNT, both #1 ratings for the past 15 years. Based on the average TV rating of the NBA going back to the 90s, the 2011-12 season was only outperformed by the second three-peat of MJ's Bulls, of which, mind you, was capped off with the most watched game in NBA history, Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals, where over 35 million people saw the last game of Chicago Michael Jordan. You see, with comparisons like that, that should have been the hint for the NBA. You see, the only reason that the NBA starts on October is because that's the way it's always been. The only reason that the NBA has 82 games in the regular season is because that's the way it's always been. Despite the fact that the game is infinitely different now than it was in the 40s and 50s, those two facts remain. And it doesn't make any sense. The players have known that for at least the past 3 years, and it's become a huge debacle. Load management is a term that's hated in some way for most every NBA fan, but it's a necessity. Kawhi Leonard, of course, is the king of this, and LeBron is notorious for it as well. In fact, you can expect at least one of them being in the news for it this season. I can guarantee you it's gonna happen. But the thing is, LeBron and Kawhi have both won championships as the team's best player. If they're taking rest, what do you think that means? This is a problem because the regular season doesn't matter. What point is there to participate in games that don't have any meaning? The answer to that problem is the simplest that the NBA has on its plate right now by far. All you have to do is put less games in the regular season. In the second decade of the 21st century, the NBA is far different and far more taxing. Why stick to a formula that was around when players were literally playing like...
John shoots, and he hits for Boston.
You know, 82 games might be classic, but it's also destructive. The NBA's tried to finagle its way around keeping players from sitting out big games, to try and cut down back-to-backs, to lengthening the season by cutting down the preseason, and all of these things, but never directly trying to change the amount of games that are in the regular season. All that changed March 12th for reasons that, we don't need to discuss. After years of debate on whether or not to shorten the season and or to bring it closer to Christmas, the NBA's now been forced again to do both, even when it's a detriment to the players. Remember the initial discussions of the 2021 season? It is speculated quite certainly that the NBA would not come back until January, possibly even pushing into February to give players the amount of time to rest and to try and solidify protocols that would allow fans in the arenas. The natural date to come back, given the league's new commitment to social justice, was January 18th, which is Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the United States, and everyone was happy with that. Until, of course, like with every business, the money came calling. The NBA just simply knew it couldn't miss the chance to grab ratings. After the disappointing drop-off in television interest in the bubble, to continue along with the players' wishes and to execute the quote-unquote morally sound option wouldn't be doing them any favors financially. And given that the virus has already cost them up to, if not more than $1 billion, you can imagine that losing more money now, especially given the lack of fan revenue for a good chunk of the season, wouldn't be in the best interest of the league. In order to somewhat reclaim the revenue that was lost in the past year, the NBA needs better ratings more than you would think. It's a battle that, if won in any way like the disaster-turned-blessing 2011 season, could create a ripple effect that keeps the NBA on television a valuable growing commodity. If it flops, then that's just another problem that the NBA has to worry about, other than, operating an indoor sports league during an airborne pandemic. Ouch. Starting in later January would have been better for the players, both morally and physically, but again, the NBA's a business. They do what they have to do to thrive, and in some cases, they do what they have to do to survive. Whichever that is in this case, I'm not necessarily sure. But what I do know is that the future of the league and its players are in the balance. If the product of the 2021 regular season outperforms the past 5 years, despite all of the issues that have been at hand, then it could spell the end of the regular season as we know it. And I think that we can all agree that that's a good thing. This year's brought about a lot of bad in the NBA. But it's also brought some good. Hopefully, Christmas can bring the NBA something great, just as it always has. Thanks for watching, and happy holidays. Alright, I'm cool.